We take a look at the New York Rangers, their offseason moves, and how they bounce back from last season's disaster on this edition of Locked On NHL GameNight.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL GameNight. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before, only on Locked On NHL GameNight. Your team every day.
Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Locked On NHL GameNight, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thanks for making Locked On NHL GameNight your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL during the regular season and the playoffs. We're available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football is around the corner. Visit FanDuel's app today and start planning your future bets now. I'm Eddie Garcia, an LA Kings fan on the West Coast. He is Shukri Wrights, a Boston Bruins fan on the East Coast. Together, we are normally discussing all the goals, saves, big moments, and stories from the night in the NHL, but obviously it's the offseason. We have no games to recap, but we're here to get you ready for next season by previewing all 32 NHL teams between now and opening night. And before we bring in this week's local expert, Shu, we are getting ready to talk all about a team that is very intriguing, and that is the New York Rangers.
Any team that plays on Broadway, under the bright lights of New York, where I'm from, is a team that's certainly under the spotlight. But after the events of last season, what better time than now than to revisit the same team and look ahead to what should be a pretty intriguing season amid all of the changes that the organization has gone through. And I'm excited to talk to Jon momentarily about it.
Yeah, let's get right into today's show. We are excited to have the host of Locked On New York Rangers. His name is Jon Chik, and he's going to give us his insights into the team that he covers on a daily basis. Jon, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Doing good. Looking forward to next season. I think sometimes when your team has a disaster season as mine did, it kind of just makes you look forward to the next one that much more because, 2 years ago, President's Trophy winners, this past season, complete and utter disaster. I get the feeling the truth is somewhere between those two extremes, but that's why we're here to talk about all the storylines and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, just the fourth team, I believe, in NHL history that went from a President's Trophy winner to missing the playoffs. And it was also a team that, wasn't like they, didn't succeed in the postseason as well, making it to the conference finals. Now that you've had plenty of time to reflect on last season, how did that happen?
Well, how much time do we have, man? That could be the entire episode here. But
yeah, about 25 minutes.
Honestly, it started in the offseason. A lot of drama with the whole Jacob Trouba situation. The Rangers want to trade him. They want to move on from him. And then that fell through. And then it lingers into the season. Trouba, by his own admission, had a difficult time leading this team after, all those talks of him being traded in the offseason. And then ultimately, they do finally trade him to the Ducks. I think there was kind of some discontent in the locker room and just the vibes were just off. The Rangers are a vibes team, I would say, just about as much as any team in the NHL. And 2 years ago, they catch that wave early in the season. They get all these awesome wins and, they power their way to an unbelievable season where they win the President's Trophy and make it to the conference final. But this year, it was just a case of anything that, can go wrong, went wrong. And I think Ranger fans could be somewhat accepting of the team taking a little bit of a step back and not winning back-to-back President's Trophies because that's very difficult to do. But when it comes down to these guys just look like they don't want to be there. The effort is an issue night in and night out. That's where I think Ranger fans, myself included, really got upset with this team. Really kind of drew our ire. And it got to the point where at the very end of the season, by the time there's 4, 5, 6 games left, it gets to the point where we just can't wait for the season to be over, man. Enough is enough already. We'll try again next season. And, I don't think things can go as bad this upcoming season as they just did. But, I also think there's a wide range of outcomes, for this upcoming season too. This will be my 7th season doing this, Locked On Rangers host. And of the 7, this is the one where I don't know what to expect. This could go one of a million different ways this upcoming season.
When I talk about the New York Rangers, and Eddie touched on the historic fall with this team from President's Trophy to not making the playoffs. Well, I actually want to look at the specifics in terms of why did things go wrong. You talk about Jacob Trouba getting traded to the Anaheim Ducks, but then also Igor Shesterkin was not right to start the year. He started off well, but then the Rangers somewhere in December, January just went into this tailspin that was very difficult to explain and never seemingly recovered. So, Jon, my question to you is, when we got to around Christmas time, things weren't jolly on Broadway.
No.
Why? And why did the Rangers struggle to get themselves back on track?
I just think there was a little bit too much locker room drama overall. You mentioned Igor Shesterkin a little while ago. There are times in the past where I do think this Ranger team, maybe sometimes to a fault, has been overly reliant on him. It's kind of a situation where it's like, well, if we make a mistake, he'll just save our bacon every single time. And Igor, now granted, he set a very high bar for himself, over the years that he's been in the NHL. But I don't think too many people would argue against the fact that this probably was his weakest season overall. Now, part of that is the fact that he had virtually no help from his defensemen or really anybody. He was kind of a man on an island on certain nights. But you see that, kind of hurting the Rangers. The fact that Igor Shesterkin was not Superman every single night, it kind of spelled doom for this team. A couple of other things, more tangible reasons to build off of Igor. The special teams took a giant step back as well. That's another situation where maybe there were times 2 years ago they were a little bit too reliant on the power play. Top 3 unit in the league, and that's awesome. It's great to be able to score on the power play, but you got to be able to get it done in other phases of the game as well. And the power play went from number 3 in the league to 5th worst in the league, and the Rangers just were not able to survive that type of a collapse there. And even the PK, I think they finished like 11th or 12th. It doesn't look that bad, but down the stretch when they needed to win games and try to push their way into the playoffs, that unit was a mess too. So they really have to fix their special teams units, not to the point where they over rely on them and just think that power play and penalty kill is going to carry the day. But they got to at least get them back on track where they're formidable units there.
All the offseason prognostications, people like to make themselves look a little bit smarter by picking a team that didn't make the playoffs to make the playoffs. I would imagine, just generally speaking, you look at the Rangers, maybe the Nashville Predators out west, teams that underachieved the year before. Maybe some people will think, okay, well, they'll bounce back the following year. You've said it yourself. You're not really sure exactly which Ranger team we're going to see, the one from 2 years ago or the one from last year. Do you have a lean on which way it's going to go? Are you completely kind of up in the air as far as how it's going to work out next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say for sure, but if I had to lean one way or the other, I'm going to say they do make the playoffs this upcoming season. Part of that, I guess, is just me being an optimist and trying to look on the bright side of things. And what we talked about earlier, this team is not as bad as they showed last year, just like maybe it wasn't as good as it showed 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they just kind of caught a wave and went with it. But, the thing I fall back on is, this is a talented team. They've got good players. You had JT Miller mid-season last year. He's, for my money, I would say like a top 20, at least top 25 player in the league. I think Gavrikov was a really nice addition as well. And as far as losing Kreider and Miller, they both had tough seasons last year. So I do think this Ranger team is a little bit better. And they also bring in Mike Sullivan. His track record speaks for itself with the Stanley Cup championships. So overall, I do think things look a little bit better around this time now than maybe they did last season. Once we got into last season, that's when things started to really fall apart. They got off to a decent start, but then things really fell off quickly. But overall, I think things are looking better than they have in quite some time for this Ranger team. And I do think there's enough there. All you got to do is finish in the top half of your conference. And I think this Ranger team can certainly do that.
When you talk about leadership with this team, it starts at the top of the GM, Chris Drury. And there were questions and people that were saying that there's a level of discontent, lack of trust in Chris Drury, because after all, you did trade away a former first-round draft pick in Capo Caco. You move on from Keandre Miller, who leaves in free agency. And my question to you, going into next season, what is your belief in Chris Drury, the general manager, in terms of his ability to harness and not just draft first-round draft picks, but to be able to ultimately see it through for them to blossom into the players they can potentially be? Because there is a feeling that Kako underperformed as a Ranger, and so did Keandre Miller. Your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think with Chris Drury, I'm a little bit, I guess, more forgiving of Drury than I think a lot of Ranger fans are. I think for the most part, during his entire tenure here, he's had a couple more hits than misses, I would say, overall. But the last year and a half have really been rough. And as far as like players not developing, you mentioned Capo Caco, who, flashes here and there, but never really became the player that the Rangers thought he would. Keandre Miller, I mean, man, I thought this dude was going to be here for like 15 years when he was like getting into his first couple seasons with the Rangers. And then things just kind of went south and they fell apart. And I feel like that kind of stuff is more on the coaching staff and more on the player development, group than it is on the general manager. But there does seem to be some discontent behind the scenes. People say there's this rumor that the players don't trust Drury. And there's times where Drury can be a little bit cutthroat, and I get that. There was last offseason when, to force Barclay Goodrow basically off the team to work around his no-trade clause, they used waivers, and they waived him, and the Sharks claimed him, and that was kind of the plan all along. And then everything that happened with Trouba this past offseason. And, I mean, look, with Kreider, things kind of went south last year. I think sometimes it gets to a situation where it's just time for two parties to go their separate ways, and I think we got there with Kreider. But the thing for me that I always come back to is, like, you could be mad at Drury if you're a player, and if you are worried about getting traded, then go out and play better. This is not the players. I think were a little bit too worried about that kind of stuff last year, and it's their job to play the games. Drury's got to make decisions that are kind of difficult, and he's got a salary cap that he's got to work within. That's another thing too. So difficult decisions have to be made. Drury was not blameless last season. I don't think anybody involved in this Ranger team was blameless last season. But to me, if you're a player on this team, your job is to go out and play. It's not to fret about what the GM is doing.
All right, up next, we'll get more into the Rangers offseason, including their new head coach. We'll discuss that next on Locked On NHL Game Night. August 28th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. FanDuel currently has Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson as the favorite to be the league MVP. Crown your champion in August. FanDuel has the Bills, Ravens, and Eagles all at plus 700 to win the Super Bowl. Or parlay your division winner dark horses. How about my Steelers at plus 480 to win the AFC North? Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. We are continuing with Jon Chik. He is the host of Locked On New York Rangers. And John, we've touched on it a little bit. An offseason coaching change. Peter Laviolette, former Stanley Cup winning coach, is out, replaced by a former Stanley Cup winning coach in Mike Sullivan, who comes over from Pittsburgh. How much do you feel like this change was necessary, and how did you feel about Mike Sullivan being the man to guide the Blue Shirts next season?
I mean, the change pretty much had to happen. And the craziest thing about that to me is after year one of Peter Laviolette, I mean, again, we keep saying this, but best record, President's Trophy, Eastern Conference Final, the whole 9 yards. You couldn't have convinced me in any way that they'd be looking for a new head coach after year two with Peter Laviolette. And unfortunately, this has kind of been par for the course for this core group of Ranger players. Quinn was here for 3 years, and then he was gone. Gallant was here for 2 years, then he's gone. Laviolette is here for 2 years, then he's gone. It's kind of like this revolving door. There's that part of me, as far as like who the next head coach is going to be, that would have liked to see the Rangers try something bold, try something outside the box, maybe give somebody their first shot as a head coach in the NHL and try to be bold in that way. We've seen that work in the past. Rod Brindamore comes to mind. John Cooper comes to mind. Bednar, I think he certainly comes to mind as well. But they didn't do that. And they went with another retread option, which is basically what they've been doing. But as far as all the former NHL coaches that you could possibly hire for this job, I think Mike Sullivan would probably be the guy. There was times where he was the head coach of the Penguins and young players were given a shot and some of them responded and he actually reacted to it. Okay, this kid is getting the job done. I'm going to keep him in the lineup. I'm going to increase his ice time. I'm going to move him up the lineup, things like that. And I think that's an issue that Ranger fans had with Laviolette and maybe even with Gallant before that, is that they always seem to defer to the veteran players, even when every eye test and every stat and every metric would tell you that maybe this younger guy is the better option. That got to be very frustrating, I think, for a lot of Ranger fans. And Sullivan, I did a crossover with Hunter and Pat from Locked On Penguins, and they made it sound like there's times where he'll, let the young guys take the reins, but even he can be stubborn. I've gotten to the point where I've just kind of accepted the fact that all NHL coaches at one time or another are going to defer to the vets. But it sounds like Sullivan isn't completely unreasonable with it. If there's a young player that's performing, he will actually react to it. And I think that's important for the Rangers right now. You've got a lot of young forwards, Gabe Perreault, Brian Hoffman, Brett Berard, who are coming along. And They need reps and they need ice time, and hopefully they get that opportunity to at least compete for prominent roles in this Ranger lineup under Sullivan, and I'm expecting that will happen.
The big question for the Rangers right now that they've hired Mike Sullivan, is what are they going to do in regards to naming a captain? This is becoming an even more bigger topic of conversation as we're getting closer and closer to training camp. So, John, in your mind, do you think that there is an importance for Sullivan to name a captain before opening night? Why or why not?
I would like to see it happen. And my pick for the captain would be JT Miller. You trade for him last offseason, during the season. And the whole idea behind it, I mean, to begin with, he's just a great player. So you start there. But it was deeper than that. They wanted to change their style of play. They want to play more straight line hockey. They want to be more gritty and in your face. They want guys that are going to get in there on the forecheck. They want guys that are going to be accountable and hold the team accountable as well. Now, Miller in the past, he has, even back to his first tenure with the Rangers, there was some immaturity at the time. We saw him and Elias Pettersson not exactly become best friends during their time with the Vancouver Canucks. The two of them seemed to clash a little bit. So making somebody like JT Miller the captain does not come without its risks. But again, for me, I want this team to do something bold, and I think that would be the move. When you've only got one Stanley Cup in 85 years, you're kind of looking for the team to roll the dice a little bit, do something bold. So JT Miller would be my choice. I would hope that it would happen before opening night, but I think there's a decent chance, given the fact that Sullivan is in his first year, that they might go without a captain. He might want to see these guys interact with each other and, okay, who are the real leaders of this locker room? Who should be wearing the letters, et cetera, et cetera. But Miller would be my choice. My honorable mention would be Vincent Trocheck. He was here last year. Seems like he stepped up in a leadership role at least a little bit last season, which is more than you can say for a lot of the other veterans on this team. Trocheck is also a little bit safer of a choice, I would say, because he's not quite as volatile a personality as JT Miller is. Plus the fact that he's been here, he's been here for 3 seasons now, going into year 4, if I'm not mistaken. And he's used to his teammates. He's used to playing in New York. And he'd be my second choice. And you could maybe throw Adam Fox in there as well. But Fox I like better as an alternate. I don't know that he's that dude that's going to, make a bunch of noise and give the rah-rah speech. I like Adam Fox, but to me, you look at somebody, who's going to, say, everybody follow my lead. To me, that's JT Miller, and he would be my choice. And hopefully that does happen before opening night. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I honestly get the feeling that they're going to go into the season without a captain, but we shall see.
John, you and I talked on a crossover edition of Locked On LA Kings, Locked On New York Rangers about the big move that was made in the offseason by the Rangers, adding the Kings' top defenseman from a year ago, one of the top UFA defensemen available in Vladislav Gavrikov. We've talked about some of the players that have moved on in K'Andre Miller and Chris Drury. Is Gavrikov enough of an addition, you think, to make a substantial difference next year?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to be because, they only had so much salary cap space to work with. And as far as free agency was concerned, he was very clearly, the big get for them. And going into free agency, I mean, as a Ranger fan, you were constantly hearing his name. The Rangers really like Gavrikov. They want to bring him in. And when I saw what Provorov got, because he was the other lefty defenseman available, the top tier lefty defenseman, and he got like $8.5 million for 8 years with the Jackets or something like that. I'm thinking like, oh my God, dude, like this is going to be insane what we pay for Gavrikov. 7 years at $7 million does not sound so bad, especially with the salary cap, substantially increasing every season. And at first I was kind of lukewarm to the idea of Gavrikov. It felt like they were just kind of targeting him just because they need a left defenseman and he's there. So let's get him. But the more you hear about him, the more I read about him, and Eddie, even the crossover episode that we did, the more I'm kind of talked into it. This guy, there's nothing like overly flashy or like tremendously impressive about his game, but he's just so steady and solid and consistent. And when you watch this Ranger team last year, they were anything but those things. And so just having any player like that that's just steady, consistent, gives you effort every night, doesn't get caught out of position, does a good job defending the blue line, he'll defend the front of the net, all that good stuff. That sounds good, man. Sign me up. I mean, he doesn't have to have like an astronomically high ceiling to be a good player. To me, he's one of those defensemen that's like a B+ at everything. And I will take that based on what I saw from the Ranger defenseman this past season.
One last question before we go to the next segment.
Yeah.
When you think about where the Rangers are currently right now, this is not a roster that's devoid of talent. When you talk about guys who can score, Artemi Panarin is the person that comes to mind. He's among the best of the best there is right now in the National Hockey League. But I got the sense last year that he was kind of fighting it a little bit at times as the season went on. So my question to you is, like, what do you expect from Panarin entering this upcoming season with a new head coach, potentially new leadership, and whatnot? And do you believe that he could return to playing at a near Hart Trophy like level like he did a couple of years ago?
Hart Trophy might be pushing it. I mean, 2 years ago, he was at a level that was just absolutely unreal. I mean, we all knew what a spectacular player he was, but even for him, I mean, he very easily cleared his own lofty bar 2 years ago. I mean, he's getting a little bit older, but he's not ancient. I mean, he's 33 years old. And I feel like with him, like the talent is there that any coach, any system, he will find a way to make it work. One of the things that I've always really liked about Panarin is that he has the ability to elevate his line mates. We didn't see it quite as much this past season because basically every player on the roster took a step back. But man, I mean, Panarin, since he's gotten with the Rangers, the amount of, centers and right wingers that have kind of come and gone, everybody that plays with him gets a boost. They just play a better brand of hockey. They see an obvious uptick in their offensive production. The Ranger power play has been fantastic other than this past season for the last handful of seasons. So, I mean, I think that, he's going to bring it. He's been the highest scorer on the Rangers every season that he's been here. I don't think that'll change for this upcoming season. And on top of that, he's playing for a new contract. This is the final year of his deal, and that could really go either way. I mean, there's a case to be made for the Rangers to let him walk, or if they're not contending at the trade deadline, try to move him then if he'll waive his no-move clause, or re-sign him at the end of the season, or even before then. I'm kind of willing to let it play out. The part of me that doesn't want them to re-sign him is the part of me that thinks that maybe they'll have a shot at one of these like big time free agents in next year's class, Connor McDavid chief among them. So, you wouldn't want to miss out on one of those big time stud free agents because you're paying too much to Panarin. But by that same token, I mean, this guy's been a great Ranger. He's been the leading scorer. And every now and then Ranger fans will talk about trading him. Trading him right now makes no sense because the Rangers, for better or worse, are going with an aggressive retooling. And instead of rebuilding, they're putting the pieces back together and hoping to contend this upcoming season. You wouldn't make all these moves that the Rangers have made and then turn around and trade your leading scorer for the last 6 years. So I'm all for letting it play out. We'll see what happens, but I do think Artemi Panarin will be one of the top players in the NHL again. Maybe not quite top 10, but I doubt he would be any worse than top 20.
All right, we'll continue to look ahead to next season for the New York Rangers here on Locked On NHL Game Night. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and helps you get the right candidates faster. If you've been in a spot where you need to hire right away, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person's a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored job posts come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, we are getting the final thoughts on the upcoming season for the New York Rangers from the host of Locked On New York Rangers, and that is Jon Chik. John, I did want to talk about the lineup, a projected lineup next season for the New York Rangers. I will read this off to you, and you let me know if this sounds about right to you or not. Top line of Trocheck, Lafreniere, and Panarin. Miller centering Cooley and Perreault. Zibanejad with Berard and Radish, and Carrick with Edstrom and Rempe. That's the forward group. The defensemen, Gavrikov and Fox, Soucy and Borgen, Schneider and Morrow, and your goaltending tandem of Shesterkin and Quick. Does that sound about right to you, or there's some changes or maybe some camp battles you could see shaking that up a bit?
That sounds about right. My big thing, though, with Gabe Perreault, I think you had him on the second line there, if I'm not mistaken. Who was he with? He was with Miller
and Cooley.
And Cooley. So honestly, and some Ranger fans might fight me on this, I would be completely fine. I would even be in favor of Gabe Perreault starting this upcoming season in the AHL. I know that he made his Ranger debut this past season, played in 4 games, showed some promise, and obviously the Rangers have big expectations for him for this upcoming season. But I've also seen way too many instances of the Rangers rushing people to the NHL. And we touched on a couple of them earlier in the episode. Capo Caca was one. Keandre Miller got off to a great start in the NHL, but maybe even he could have used some seasoning in the AHL. When you look at the long run, maybe that was a case. You could throw Lafreniere into that group as well. So I'm cool. Even if it's just like 15 or 20 games, let him get his feet under him a little bit. Let the AHL kind of serve as that bridge from college hockey to the NHL, build his confidence a little bit, then call him up when you have a role in mind for him. It's got to be a prominent role. It can't be like 7 minutes a night on the fourth line. So that's one thing I would do differently. I would also, instead of Perreault being there, I would move Mika Zibanejad to second line right wing with JT Miller. Mika last year got off to a dreadful start, as a lot of players in the Rangers did. Once the Rangers traded for JT Miller, brought him back, it was in very short order that they moved Mika from center to right wing and put him with JT Miller. And that's when Mika started to play some really good hockey. His offensive production obviously went up, but he just was playing a better brand of hockey. He was giving you more effort, forechecking and back-checking, even a couple of like open ice hits from Mika Zibanejad, which you don't really expect. But I think that's the JT Miller effect. And for that reason, man, give me Mika and JT Miller basically connect at the hip for this upcoming season. And what was the third line again? I know it was on screen for a second there, but can you run that by me again real quick?
Yeah, sorry, we had I'm not sure why, but we usually put this up on the screen, and but apparently it didn't want to work. The third line had Zibanejad, Radish, and Berard. Okay,
so I would have Berard there for sure. I like that for Berard. I would have either Brodzinski or Parson in there, preferably Brodzinski. I think he played well last season. And I mean, some people, they're going to feel like that's a bridge too far, Brodzinski on the third line, but I liked his game last season. And on the left wing, if Othman makes a team, I would probably have him there. I would like to see Othman there. Yeah.
So the Rangers decide that they were going to bring back a key piece to their locker room from last season. I'm talking about the one and only former LA King goalie, Jonathan Quick. And from everything that I read, Jonathan Quick is beloved in that Ranger locker room and is a perfect backup to Igor Shesterkin. So my question to you, John, is what are some of the intangibles in Jonathan Quick that you see that led the Rangers to saying, we're going to bring him back, not just because he's such an invaluable part of the locker room, but also he's still a pretty solid backup goaltender at his advanced age.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the re-signing. They've kind of been just going 1 year at a time with Quick. They signed him to a 1-year deal, then they extend him for 1 year, then they extend him for 1 year again. And that might be how Quick wants to do it, because who knows how much longer he wants to go. But I love the move. I think, like you said, for a backup goalie, you could certainly do a heck of a lot worse. One thing that I mentioned all the way back a couple of years ago when they first signed Quick in free agency, and, some fans are kind of rolling their eyes a little bit. And I said, look, I mean, I hope nothing ever happens to Igor Shesterkin, but if it's the playoffs and Igor has to miss a couple of games, yeah, man, I'll take my chances on Jonathan Quick setting back the clock and being maybe not quite what he was in his prime, but I'll take Jonathan Quick in some high-stakes playoff games. He's no stranger to that. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, and those two Kings teams, I mean, he was probably the most valuable player on both of those squads. Eddie would probably know that a little bit better than me, but certainly he was up there. So I love it. And as far as leadership goes, I mean, certainly you need some veterans in the locker room. I think Quick is a guy that walks into that locker room with instant credibility. His stats, his awards, his Stanley Cups, all that stuff speaks for itself. He's seen it and done it all in the NHL. And, even just as a hockey fan in general, it's been fun kind of watching him reset the clock a little bit and kind of turn back time these last couple of seasons. Because I know for a couple of years with the Kings, he had some shaky seasons. And a lot of that probably has to do with the supporting cast, which is a lot better now than it was then for the Kings. But I really like the re-signing. I'm glad he's back. And we can continue to go year by year here. I mean, imagine Jonathan Quick ends up for like 5 years on the New York Rangers. I don't think anybody saw that coming.
No, I certainly did not see that coming. I can tell you that. But you mentioned you're a little bit more forgiving about GM Chris Drury than maybe others. He is going into his 6th season, I believe, as GM. I wanted to ask you about his job security. And of course, fans can all have their opinions. We can have ours. But of course, the biggest opinion is ownership. And James Dolan appears to have a good relationship, appears to like the job Chris Drury's doing. Would that be accurate to say?
I think so. I mean, with Dolan, you never know for sure, right? I mean, he could have a knee-jerk reaction any day of the week, and everything could be different in the blink of an eye. But overall, yes, I do think Drury has found his way into Dolan's good graces. I think the fact that they did get to 2 conference finals, that carries some weight for Dolan. But I also think this is a massively important season for Chris Drury because, again, they went full on retooling instead of rebuilding. And I would imagine that Drury and his talks with Dolan probably convinced them, you know what, this year is a fluke. We're going to fix some things. We're going to get a couple guys out of here. We'll get a couple guys in here. Everything will be back to normal next year. We'll be back to being a contender. Well, if that doesn't happen and there's continued, discontent in the locker room, if there's guys underperforming, if there's young guys who aren't reaching the expectations that the team has for them, I mean, at a certain point, man, I mean, you run out of chances. That's just the way it goes in professional sports. That's not exclusive to the Rangers and Drury or anybody else. That's just the name of the business. And so for that reason, I do think this is a tremendously important season for Drury. If the Rangers can turn things around, he probably buys himself a lot more job security. If they can't, then, I mean, I don't want to say for sure one way or another, but this could end up being Drury's last season with the Rangers. I mean, there's certainly no guarantee either way. But if everything falls apart again, they miss the playoffs by 10 or 12 points, I mean, you talk about being at a crossroads, and I think at that point, heads might start rolling.
I have one question, last one.
Yes,
so, sir. A part of all the changes that's happened with the New York Rangers this past season, there was one change in particular that I could not let this episode go by without talking about. The retirement of the legendary Sam Rosen, Hockey Hall of Fame broadcaster, 40 years. Also, being a native New Yorker, I know how much Sam Rosen means to New York and his iconic broadcast and his call of the 94 Stanley Cup Finals Game 7 against Vancouver. We all know like that call echoes in the annals of hockey history. So, John, I wanted to just get your thoughts on Sam Rosen's retirement, the legacy he leaves behind, not just in New York, but across the NHL, and as well as all of hockey, and as well as what Sam Rosen has meant to you.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, I don't know Ranger hockey without Sam Rosen, and I'm going to be 39 this upcoming week coming up here. And, he just becomes synonymous with all these moments and all these unbelievable calls that he's made over the years. And I think what stands out for me about Rosen, and we'll get to the hockey stuff in a second, but first and foremost, just an awesome dude. This is a very competitive business that we're all in, sports media here.
Yep.
And once you make it big and kind of like get on the big stage, as Sam Rosen obviously did, it's kind of rare that anybody in a position like that can have nobody say a bad word about him. Like, has anyone ever heard anyone say a bad word about Sam Rosen? Everybody that's met him says he's an awesome guy. His peers all love him. Just a stand-up quality dude and somebody that you feel like you're kind of watching the game with him. That's the best compliment that I can give to, I think, any announcer. They make it feel like you're just watching the game right along with them. And I mean, there's so many calls that I can do by heart. I mean, Shu, you mentioned the 94 Stanley Cup. The waiting is over. The New York Rangers are the Stanley Cup champions. A couple of years ago, Panarin in overtime against the Penguins, and it's Panarin, or no, it's Rangers win. That's what it was. There we go. But yeah, man, I mean, he's the best, and it's a whole new world. I do think Kenny Albert is a great choice to step into the booth in his place because he's a great announcer too, and he's been doing the Ranger radio for quite some time. But yeah, man, I'm gonna miss him. I don't know if it's really gonna hit me until like the regular season starts and we get a couple games in. And where's Sam? He's enjoying retirement, but hey, he has every right to do that. Just an unbelievable career, and very cool to hear that he's gonna be spending some more time with his family now as well.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes that Joe Micheletti, his partner, basically let Sam have all the love because we knew this was his last season. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm gonna step down too." But he didn't want it to take away from Sam Rosen's farewell because he knew what kind of guy Sam was and how much he meant. So what a classy move by Joe Micheletti, as well as you got a whole new broadcast crew there for MSG for the New York Rangers.
Dave Joe, by the way, sorry, what was that?
No, I'm saying Dave Maloney on Kenny's longtime radio partner is also stepping into the TV booth as well.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think we could ask for a much better duo to replace the two of them. But for what it's worth, Joe, he didn't get as much attention as Sam, and that was by design. Like you just said, Eddie Joe never really announced that he was leaving. But man, he did a heck of a job too. And they just made it fun. They just made it fun. That's the best thing I can say about them, and they will certainly be missed.
Well, John, this was fun. And you know what else is going to be fun? Opening night for the Rangers, part of that triple header on October 7th, when the Rangers will be taking on Mike Sullivan's old team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. So a pretty cool storyline to open up the season.
I can't wait. Looking forward to it, man. Like I said earlier, when you have a terrible season as the Rangers did, just makes you want to throw it in the trash and get to the next season as quickly as possible. So I'm looking forward to it.
That is Jon Chik. He is our local expert on the New York Rangers. If you are a Rangers fan, you need to subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers for all the latest news and opinions on that team, all off season, all season long. John, continued success with the show. We thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We'll have to do this again sometime.
All right, thank you, John. And that'll do it for this off-season look at the New York Rangers and for this edition of Locked On NHL Game Night off-season edition. We are doing this all off-season long, looking at every team in the NHL, leading you up to the 2025-26 NHL season. If you've missed any of our previous previews of any of the other teams, they're available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Shukri Wrights. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.